Mom looked me in the eye and said, "You're nothing like your brother, you're a disgrace." I just nodded. 3 months later I drove past her house in a Ferrari, and then she didn't yell it. That's what made it worse. My mom looked me square in the eyes across the dinner table, surrounded by family, the smell of roasted chicken still lingering in the air, and calmly said, "You're nothing like your brother. You're a disgrace." There was no anger in her voice. Just disappointment, rehearsed and sharp. She said it like a conclusion she'd reached long ago, and this was merely the announcement. I didn't say a word. Didn't flinch. I just nodded. I don't think anyone expected that. To be fair, I don't think anyone at the table was surprised she said it. My brother, Benjamin, Dr. Benjamin Carter, to be precise, was sitting right beside her, hands folded, face neutral, not even pretending to stop her. He didn't need to. He was the golden child. Pre-med at 16, Harvard at 20, a residency offer before he even graduated med school. A walking LinkedIn success story. And then there was me. The other one. Nate. The high school grad who didn't go to college, didn't chase titles or tradition. Who dropped out of community college to build apps in his bedroom. Who lived off ramen and freelance for pennies while trying to make something, anything, of his dream. I remember Dad clearing his throat. Grandma picking at her napkin. Even my little cousin Emma seemed to hold her breath. But no one said a word. Except Mom. "You need to stop pretending that building little apps is a real job. Benjamin saves lives. What do you do? Play on your computer all day?" That was the first sign of trouble. Not because it was the first cruel thing she said, but because it was the moment I realized she actually meant it. I'd always assumed her indifference was just habit. That maybe one day I'd do something, create something, that would finally make her look at me the way she looked at him. But that night told me everything I needed to know. That's when something inside me shifted. I put down my fork, wiped my mouth, and stood up. No dramatic exit. No monologue. I just said, "Thanks for dinner," and walked out. I didn't go back. I didn't answer their calls. For the next 3 months, I didn't exist to them. But I was very much alive. And I was about to prove it. The night I walked out of that dinner, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even drink, though God knows I had half a bottle of whiskey staring at me from the top of my fridge. I sat at my desk. And I worked. It wasn't revenge, not at first. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was survival. A fire had been lit, not in anger, but in clarity. I finally understood that the acceptance I kept chasing was never coming. So I poured every ounce of that clarity into code. I'd been tinkering with an idea for months, a personal project I called Core. It was a productivity app, but not just another to-do list or calendar. It was built on this concept of adaptive flow tracking. It learned how you worked and optimized your schedule, nudging you toward peak performance. I believed in it. I just hadn't had the bandwidth, or maybe the desperation, to go all in. Now I had both. I quit my freelance gigs, cashed out the tiny savings I had, moved back into my old studio apartment, and I coded like a man possessed. 12 hours a day. 14. 16. I barely ate. I barely spoke to anyone. I slept in 2-hour blocks, jolting awake with a bug fix or new feature swirling in my head. And then, one Tuesday morning in early March, I posted the beta to Product Hunt. That's when things changed. The upvotes started trickling in within an hour. By noon, someone at a major productivity blog picked it up. By evening, a tech YouTuber made a video calling it the app that might finally kill procrastination. Downloads exploded. I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I had 3 emails from VC firms. 2 days later, a Zoom call with a guy named Aaron in San Francisco turned into a $1.2 million seed round. Just like that, I wasn't the disgrace anymore. I was a founder, a CEO. And 3 weeks after that, I was signing the papers for a cherry red Ferrari Portofino. Not because I needed it. Not even because I wanted it. but because I knew exactly where I was going to drive it. I waited exactly 3 months. Not a day more, not a day less. The Ferrari wasn't just a car, it was a statement. Smooth, unapologetic, and loud in all the ways I had never been allowed to be. I took my time picking the color, too. I knew red was cliché. That was the point. It demanded attention. The kind of attention my mother reserved for my brother's framed diplomas and televised interviews. The engine purred like it knew the mission. I left the apartment early, just after sunrise. The air was still cool, the streets mostly empty. I took the long way through downtown, then past the old school I used to walk to while Ben got rides in Dad's car. Memories came back in fragments. Sitting at the back of the class. Forgotten birthdays. That one science fair where I built a working robot, and Mom said, "That's cute," before reminding me Ben had won nationals the year before. I didn't hate my brother. That's the strange part. I didn't even blame him. He played the game he was born into. But me? I was always a misfit puzzle piece forced into the wrong box. The closer I got to the house, the more my pulse quickened. Not out of fear, no, this was different. This was anticipation. I turned onto our old street, the one with the mailbox shaped like a lighthouse at the corner. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The trees. The sidewalks. Even the house itself. It was beige with dark green shutters and an overwatered lawn, the kind of place where silence lived behind tightly shut blinds. I pulled up and stopped right in front. And then I waited. The engine idled as I leaned back in the leather seat. Hands on the steering wheel. Sunglasses on. Just like a scene from a movie, only this one was real. Then, the front door opened. My mother stepped out, robe tied tightly around her waist, coffee cup in hand. She paused on the porch, looking confused at first. Then her eyes locked on the car. On me. She blinked, as if trying to clear a mirage. I took off my sunglasses. Her face, God, her face. It went from surprise to disbelief to something I hadn't seen from her in years. Doubt. I smiled, but it wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile you wear when the truth finally shows up, on 4 wheels and with Italian leather seats. She took a cautious step down from the porch, her robe trailing behind her like she'd forgotten where she was. The cup in her hand trembled just slightly, not enough for her to admit it, but enough for me to notice. "Nathan?" she said, squinting. I stepped out of the car. My shoes hit the pavement with the kind of finality that silence couldn't drown out. The sun had risen just enough to cast that golden hue over the hood of the Ferrari, catching every shimmer in the paint, every inch of what she used to call impossible. She opened her mouth again, maybe to ask a question, maybe to say my name again, but I didn't let her. "I thought I'd swing by," I said, voice calm, casual, disarming. She looked me over like I was a stranger wearing my face. What is this? What are you doing with that car?" "This?" I said, tapping the roof with my fingers. "This is what Disgrace looks like, now." That one landed. I could see it. Her expression faltered, lips parting, eyes darting between the car, me, and the silence between us. She tried to recover. "Is this some kind of joke? Where did you even get the money?" I took a step closer. Not threatening. Just enough to make sure she heard every word. "I built something," I said. "An app. It went viral. People invested. Turns out there's a market for the things you never believed in. I never said you couldn't succeed. You said I was a disgrace," I cut in. "At the dinner table. In front of everyone. And you meant it." She looked away for a second. "That was—" "No," I said, sharper now. "Don't rewrite it. Don't pretend it was just frustration or tough love. You meant it. And that's fine. Because now I want you to see what you turned your back on." The wind stirred. Somewhere behind her, I saw the blinds shift, Dad, maybe, or a curious neighbor. I didn't care. I worked. I bled for this. And I didn't do it to spite you, but I won't lie, driving past this house with everything you said I couldn't have? I gestured at the car. "It feels pretty good." She tried again, softening her voice. Nathan, this isn't who you are. No, I said. This is exactly who I am. You just never bothered to look. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. Because for the first time, I saw it in her eyes, not pride, not love, but regret. She stepped back, just a fraction, but I caught it. That tiny retreat. That subtle shift in her stance. It was the first time I'd ever seen her unsure. Nathan, this isn't how families treat each other, she said, but her voice was thinner now, like the confidence had drained out of her. You don't show up like this just to make a point. I almost laughed. But instead I took a slow breath and said, No. Families don't treat each other like you did. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. I had waited too long to be interrupted now. You spent my whole life measuring me against someone else's ruler. Every win I had, every small success, you brushed aside because it didn't come with a title or a white coat. That's not true. Isn't it? I snapped. You never came to my demo day. You never asked about the apps I built. When I got my first freelance check, you said, That's cute, but when are you going to get a real job? Do you know how hard it is to keep building when the person who raised you acts like your dream is a phase? Her lips pressed into a line, and for a second, I thought she might finally say it. I'm sorry. But instead, she whispered, I didn't know. That's the problem, I said quietly. You never cared enough to know. We stood there in silence. Then she asked, almost inaudibly, Why did you come back? I looked at her for a long moment. The woman who made me feel small for most of my life now looked smaller than ever. To show you what you miss, I said. To let you see what happens when someone finally stops asking for permission to exist. She looked away, blinking fast. Whether it was the sun in her eyes or something else, I didn't ask. I didn't need her tears. Just the truth. The silence between us hung like humidity, thick, clinging, heavy with everything that had never been said. For a moment, I thought she might say something that would change things. That maybe, just maybe, this would be the turning point in our story. But she didn't speak. She just stood there, gripping her coffee cup like a lifeline, staring at the ground. I could see it in her eyes, not pride, not admiration, not even guilt. Just confusion. Like the equation no longer made sense to her. For years, she'd lived in a simple narrative, Benjamin the success, Nathan the disappointment. And now I had rewritten it without her permission. She stepped forward again, slower this time. Nathan, I don't know what you expect from me. Nothing, I said. That's the beauty of it. Her shoulders dropped. Whether in defeat or relief, I couldn't tell. That night, I continued, when you called me a disgrace in front of the whole family, I didn't say anything because I realized arguing with you was like yelling into the wind. You'd already made up your mind about who I was. She looked up, and for the first time, her voice cracked. I was scared for you. No, I said calmly but firmly. You were scared of being embarrassed by me. You were scared of how it would look to your friends that one son wore scrubs and the other wore hoodies. Her eyes flicked to the Ferrari, then back to me. I guess it doesn't look so bad now, I added. A bitter smile tugged at her mouth. So what now? You prove your point and drive off into the sunset? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to see your face when you realized I didn't need your approval to matter. She didn't answer. Didn't defend herself. Didn't even try. She just stood there, for once, unable to cast a verdict. And that, somehow, said more than any apology ever could. I turned to leave. Not out of spite. Not as a final act of rebellion. Just because the conversation had ended, and there was nothing left to say. But before I reached the car, she said something that stopped me cold. Does Benjamin know? I looked back, and for a second I saw her. Not the judgmental woman from my childhood. Not the cold voice from the dinner table. But a mother, unsure, unsteady, wondering if her world had tilted too far to fix. No, I said. He's got enough pressure without worrying about me. She nodded slowly, as if that answer added yet another crack to a truth she had built her whole life around. You know, she said, almost wistfully, he never liked being the favorite. He always thought I was too hard on you. I raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't he ever say anything? Her eyes met mine. Because he thought it would make it worse. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it excused anything, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected for years. Everyone knew. No one said anything. I climbed into the driver's seat, the leather warm from the morning sun, and looked at her one last time through the windshield. Tell him I'm doing fine, I said. No, tell him I'm doing better than fine. She gave a single nod. Just one. It wasn't approval. It wasn't apology. But maybe it was acknowledgement. And maybe, for now, that was enough. I didn't speed off like some action movie cliché. No engine roar. No tire squeal. Just a slow, deliberate turn of the wheel and a steady roll down the street I grew up on. The road hadn't changed. Same cracked sidewalks. Same leaning street lamps. Same overgrown hedges in front of the Johnsons' house 2 doors down. But everything felt different, smaller, almost fictional. Like a set piece from a show I used to star in before the producers wrote me off. The farther I drove, the more vivid the past became. I passed the corner where I used to wait for the bus in the freezing rain while Mom drove Ben to swim practice in the heated Volvo. Drove past the gas station where I got my first job at 17, bagging ice and stocking shelves, while Ben was volunteering at a hospital in Peru. For a long time, I thought maybe if I just worked hard enough, she'd notice me. Maybe if I earned enough, launched enough, made enough noise, she'd see me. But here's the thing they never tell you about climbing your own mountain. Sometimes the summit is empty. I didn't feel triumphant as I left that street behind. I felt hollow. Not because the moment hadn't meant something, it had. But because all the energy I'd spent chasing her approval suddenly had nowhere left to go. At a red light, I sat with my hands resting on the steering wheel, watching the world move around me. A kid on a bike rode past with a backpack twice his size. A woman walked a golden retriever, laughing into her phone. They didn't know me. They didn't care what car I drove or what I'd built, or what I'd come from. They just lived. I envied them. I pulled into a park, one I hadn't visited since I was a teenager, and killed the engine. The silence was immediate and unnerving. Without the engine hum, I was left alone with everything I didn't say on that porch. The anger. The hurt. The need. She would never love me the way she loved Ben. Not because she couldn't, but because she had decided long ago who I was, and anything that didn't fit that narrative was filtered out like background noise. And maybe that's the real tragedy, not that she didn't believe in me, but that even now, even after everything, she still wouldn't say, I was wrong. I leaned back in the seat, stared through the windshield at the canopy of trees overhead, and let the weight of the years press into my chest. Not crushing. Just real. She would tell people I came by. That I flaunted my success. That I wanted revenge. But she'd never say what actually happened. That her son, who once begged for scraps of her attention, had come back not to beg, but to stand. To let her see what she had ignored. To look her in the eyes and be undeniable. And then, to walk away on his own terms. I stayed at the park for hours. I didn't have anywhere else to be, not really. I had meetings I could postpone, calls I could miss, investors who could wait. Today wasn't about them. Today was about 15 years of silence, disappointment, and the slow erosion of a bond that never really had a chance to grow. I sat there, watching people come and go, families with strollers, kids with kites, teenagers with earbuds, and wondered what it might have been like if things had been different. If she had looked at me when I was 13, sitting cross-legged in the garage, taking apart an old computer just to see if I could put it back together. If she had said something, anything, when I showed her the first website I coded at 16. If she'd come to my graduation, even when I told her I didn't want a fuss. But she hadn't. She was too busy stitching her legacy to Ben's success. The framed diplomas, the family friends' praise, the "Your son is a genius" emails she printed out and left on the kitchen counter like trophies. She wasn't just proud of him, she needed him to be the proof that she had done something right. And me? I was the crack in that porcelain mask. The one she tried to sand down or paint over or hide behind comments like, "Maybe one day you'll figure it out." Or, "Not everyone is cut out for big things." I remember once, God, I must have been 17, she told me. "Your brother plans. He follows through. You just chase things." That line stuck with me for years. And here I was now, chased a dream all the way into a corner office and a car she couldn't even name. And still, I felt like that boy in the garage. Not because I needed more, but because the part of me that once craved her pride never really stopped looking for it. I got out of the car eventually and walked the edge of the lake. Watched the wind skip over the water like it was trying to outrun something. That's when my phone buzzed. Ben. I stared at the name for a long moment. I hadn't spoken to him since that dinner. He hadn't reached out, hadn't checked in, not that I expected him to. We weren't close, and we both knew why. I answered. "Hey," he said. "Hey. I heard. Mom told me you came by." I let that hang for a second. "Yeah. She didn't say much. Just that you drove up in some ridiculous car and gave her a piece of your mind." I laughed quietly. "Sounds about right." There was a pause. Then, "She's shaken." "Good." He sighed. "You know she's not going to change, right?" "I know. I mean, she should have treated you better." "I always thought that." "Then why didn't you say anything?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Because it wasn't my fight. And maybe because I was afraid she'd turn on me too." That I hadn't expected. For the first time, I heard something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Fear. "I'm sorry," he added, "for not being more. I don't know." There. I stopped walking. Looked out over the water. "It's fine. I don't need you to apologize for her." "I'm not. I'm apologizing for me." I didn't know what to say to that. "Listen," he said after a while. "I'm proud of you. I always was." That one hit harder than it should have. Because I realized I hadn't just wanted to be seen by her. I wanted someone to see me. Anyone. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. We didn't talk much more after that. Just a few words. A promise to maybe grab lunch. A goodbye that didn't feel like a final chapter. When I hung up, I stood still, the breeze lifting the edges of my jacket, the world around me moving on without a care. And I realized something: success doesn't heal everything. It doesn't fill every void or rewrite every scar. But it gives you a voice. It gives you the power to walk back into the places that once tried to bury you, and leave footprints so deep they can't pretend you were never there. I didn't go back to that house again. I didn't need to. That one morning, pulling up, stepping out, telling the truth, wasn't about changing her. It was about freeing me. From the weight of chasing what was never mine to earn. From the silence I wore like a second skin. From the idea that I had to prove my worth to someone who never tried to understand it. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Sometimes the best revenge isn't success. It's peace. The kind that comes when you stop asking to be seen and start living like you already are. By you. And that's enough.